Welcome to Commander Central, episode 32, and are you ready for a brawl? Today we're going to talk about the new format, the new Commander-ish format, Brawl, and we'll find out if it's the new Tiny Leaders or if it's the new Frontier. One of those two, though, is probably what it is. But first, we'll hit up social media, and we'll pour over any news in the world of Magic and talk about some games we played. I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
This is Commander Central. So how's everyone doing this nice Wednesday afternoon? I'm kidding. It's Friday again. We're recording on Friday.
I really had to think about that. I'm like, wait, it's Wednesday? Oh, my God. I am way off.
Once again, it's Friday. We're recording.
I'm like 2 drinks into this beer, so I was slightly confused.
That was a big beer, too, that I saw you crack.
Yeah, what is that ginormous oil can you're drinking from?
So we have this new place in town called Growler, guys.
And I've heard of it.
So you can go there, and they have like 50 taps, and they do pints. They do a crawler, which is this giant 32-ounce can.
That's a quart. That's a quart can.
Or you can do a growler, which is a gallon. And so
is it like a milk jug gallon?
Yeah, a glass milk jug. It's awesome. They're expensive, though. But you can continue using it to refill. So you just take your growler and you just pay for the refill. But I was there on opening weekend and stood in line for an hour because the grand prize were 10 people could win free beer for a year. So I'm like, okay, cool. You enter when you walk in the door. You know, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I want a free pizza.
Typical Wisconsin alcoholics all standing
right.
in line.
Exactly.
So I picked this up on opening weekend, and it's been a long week. So I cracked it tonight. And granted, I was actually just there 2 nights ago for dinner and drank like 2 of these, but spread it out against other different types of beer.
Nice.
Welcome to Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly.
Where we have more bars per capita than we do grocery stores.
Right.
And churches.
Wisconsin. So anything exciting happening this week for anybody? Nothing really?
No.
I got pulled over the other night. We can talk about that at a different time.
How did you manage that? What were you doing?
So I saw him come out, got behind me. He got behind me real fast. Didn't pull me over.
What were you driving?
My daily driver.
Okay, so you weren't like anything too flashy.
I looked down at my Speedo. I was doing speed limit.
No donuts in the parking lot?
No, nothing like that. By the way, that's another story we can talk about one day. So get up by my house, so about 7 miles from where he came out behind me, and he pulls me over. Comes up to me, and he's like, so back at the TV station, which was like 7 miles ago, you were doing 50 miles an hour through there. I'm like, no, I wasn't. I was like, do you have radar of that? No, I don't. He's like, and then I pulled you over right now because you're doing 46 and a 45. I'm like, do you have radar of that? He's like, no, I don't. He's like, I'm not going to argue with you about citation rules and the rules of traffic and all that. I'm like, I will be recording this conversation from now on. So I pulled up my phone and recorded it. He took my license. He's like, I'll be back. Came back with a warning and told me to go home.
Oh, wow.
Did he literally pull you over like right by your house?
Right next to the bank, right up there by Hardee's.
Wow.
So he followed you essentially from the card shop.
Yep.
To home.
Yep.
Ugh.
Waiting for me to do something wrong.
Altoona?
You do look like a troublemaker.
No, I don't. No, it was an Eau Claire squad.
Interesting.
Yep.
I would expect that from an Altoona squad, but not Eau Claire.
Yeah, as soon as I told him I was going to videotape the rest of this conversation, he took my license and went back and then brought me a warning.
Know your rights, people.
Ticket, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, much better than a ticket. It was quite amusing because the warning was for 1 to 10 over, even though he said I was doing like 15 or 20 over when the initial violation happened. So
if you were doing that, he would have pulled you over right away.
Like the other one that I went around doing 60 down that road in the rain. My first initial response was, yeah, I think there's an undercover cop. No, it's not. Oh, well, we're going to go around him. Go around him immediately as soon as I pulled right back in front of him. The lights came on. I'm like, yep, that was an undercover cop.
Well, I have an addendum kind of to a story on here. I just made a joke a few weeks ago about like my wife trapping me at night with a pillow that I almost face planted on.
I remember that.
And I've also mentioned my son listening to this podcast. So I get home Tuesday night, and there's like there's a bathroom in the hallway, kind of in between the bedrooms. And rather than going to our bedroom and going to the bathroom before bed, I just went in the hallway one that my son usually uses. And the door was like only halfway open, and I just pushed it open to walk in. And a thing filled with balls, like it was like a cloth bin from his room that he had filled to the brim with like rubber balls and stuff, falls on my head because he had balanced it because he heard me reference my wife setting traps and decided to set a trap for me in the bathroom. So I get this bin of balls dumped on me at like 12:30 after coming home from the card shop, and which was funny. I laughed out loud, and then I walked my cards. I was going to take them downstairs, and the stairs going down to our basement. It's kind of like this open stairwell. There's like a kind of a ledge on this half wall. And when I walked in the house, I saw something there, but I didn't think anything of it. And I walked down the steps and I see a rope hanging down. And then I looked up, and on top of that like ledge, there's a blanket covering something. And that rope has a sign on it, sign taped to the rope that says, "Pull me."
No.
So I walked back up to look, and I lifted up the blanket, and it's another bin of balls. and I didn't pull it, obviously. But like the next morning, I'm like, "What is that going on over there?" And like his response was, "Well, I figured if someone saw a sign that said 'pull me' on a rope, they'd pull it." Why would you not? So that was the second trap. It wasn't as effective as the first one, but it was more complicated.
Hey, a bin of balls is better than a bucket of water.
But he's nailed me but I've got hit with it now. He's done it several times since then. And I've gotten hit with those balls, that bin of balls, probably 6 times now since then. Because I just don't think. I just like walk into his room. He'll go to bed, and I'll say, "I'm going to come in and tuck you in like 5 minutes." And I'll walk and open his door, and it'll drop on my head again. So he's hit me probably half a dozen times with it now. All because I made a reference in the show about traps.
I have a feeling your wife has okayed all this with him too.
Well, because she's got hit with it a few times too now. Yeah, because like he set them for me and it's hit her, which then he's like, "Oh, I can get mom too." So now he's setting them for her.
Oh no!
At least they're like non-lethal traps, but
right.
Google cow traps and
right.
have some fun.
Exactly. So that is my trap story. How about games this week? Any fun games you played? We played quite a few.
Played 3, yeah.
The one thing I am going to reference here is on the Command Zone podcast or YouTube channel, whatever it is, both, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
On episode 201, which came out last week, they had this Commander Summit. So they had Phil from Commander Inn and I forget the guy's name from Commander's Brew. But they had multiple people on there talking about the state of Commander this year. And one of the things Josh Requai mentioned was, should we get rid of Commander damage in the format? And no one else really agreed with that either. You guys are both shaking your heads no, too.
Keep it.
And the other 3 people, including Jimmy, weren't on board. That I didn't think was a good idea. But I thought I'd just mention, like, at Commander Night this week, I killed 3 different people with Commander damage, and I saw at least 2 more happen, including one with me. So I think, Max, you killed me at least once with Dramoka.
Yep.
And that wasn't even like in a Voltron situation, like a Rafik deck wearing 4 swords or something. It was just incidental kind of, well, not even incidental, but like you had one point, it wasn't a berserk, but you had like
overwhelming stampede for like 11.
Yeah, and you'd already hit me once. I killed 2 people with Hesperia with double strike out, so she's a 6/4, whatever it is, which made it 12 for the first hit, and then commander damage for the second hit. So I did that twice, and I killed 1 person with Mina and Den. I mean, that wasn't even like trying. I just like, he seemed to think it doesn't happen, and it happens, I think, a lot more than.
Well, there have been games that I've been in playing my Ural deck, and I'm sure you've been in the same with Sigarda, where even you may not be killing them with commander damage, but your life's at like 200 life. No one's going to kill you without commander damage.
Yep. Without the commander damage, those life gain decks get out of control, and you can't stop it.
Right, yeah. There's nothing you can do sometimes with that Oro deck that gets 200 life or infinite life.
Yep.
But even 200, I mean, that's almost impossible to just work down sometimes. So anyway, I thought I would mention that, like, for something that that at least Josh was seriously talking about, man, I was just like, I didn't realize how often it happened. It happened a lot this week.
Yeah.
So, I think that was really, I played a bunch of games and they were all pretty good, but I don't think anything truly weird jumped out.
No.
Actually, I had one nice play that made me feel pretty smart. The player I killed with Mina and Den damage, it was swinging with Mina and Den, and I blood rushed
Rubble Hulk
to give Mina and Den like 14-14 or something. So I had 14 lands out, so it's coming up for an 18-18. And the person I was swinging at, it's like, doesn't have trample, right? I'm like, well, I did this on purpose. I'm like, well, I can tap a mountain in a forest to bounce the land and give it trample. I didn't have a mountain out, or didn't have a mountain untapped. He's like, yeah, but you don't have a mountain available. I'm like, oh man, yeah, okay, I don't. She's like, all right, I'm just going to take it. I won't block. And I'm like, and Berserk. So I kind of baited him in, and then I felt like I was very clever for doing that.
I know during my one game that I played with Alessia, I had a guy actually scoop the last guy in the game because I had Cathar's Crusade out with Panharmonicon with, I do believe the enchantment's called Fateful Showdown.
Yep.
The red enchantment that copies creatures when they come into play.
Yep.
And just a bunch of tokens coming in the battlefield, and he said, I don't want to do the math. I'm just going to
Exactly.
scoop.
Exactly. I've seen that before. We're like, man, Cathar's Crusade, I'm just annoyed. I'm just not going to deal with it. I'm just going to lose. That's fine. Yeah, that card is... Cathar's Crusade is a great card, but it's annoying to deal with.
I don't even like doing the math. Half the time I don't play it unless I absolutely need
Unless
to.
you're going to win with it.
Yeah.
I don't want it out unless I'm going to win the game with it.
Very true.
All right, social media this week. What do we got?
Well, where do we want to start with this? How about we start with the large discussion that's been going on through the Twitter about the new Commander's Arsenal, what the decks are going to be.
Yeah, we had a bunch of people going back and forth about what the reprints were going to be. I don't know. It's they kind of surprised me a little bit last year with the ones they picked. I did not expect to see the Titania deck show up.
Or Marin, even for that.
Marin was popular, so I guess I kind of get that. I'm assuming it's Atraxa this year is one of them, just because that's the most popular commander.
We also have one extra set we have to include now is with 2017.
Right. So
is that going to be out before Anthology?
2017 has been out, so that's like Edgar.
Oh, my bad. I'm thinking 2018.
Was 2016 in the last reprint either? So there's two sets technically.
Right.
So we'll have the Partners set and 4-color set and this year's the Tribal set.
Right, and maybe they won't even consider the Tribal sets because it's too new still?
That wouldn't surprise me.
Maybe.
Yeah. I think we'll definitely get one of the first go-rounds because that was so long ago. And that wouldn't surprise me to see all three of the first years and then probably Atraxa.
Yeah, I bet it's Atraxa, Azuri, and two of the originals. I don't think we'll get another Planeswalker.
I'd like to see a Laurel. Although I would love to see one of those Planeswalker decks get printed again.
For the foil?
For the foil.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That'd be nice.
Print the Nahiri one. Please, Wizards. Listen to me. Print the Nahiri one.
Duretti.
Just to make everyone mad.
Yes.
They'll do Obnix.
There's actually people that are looking for that Obnix.
Really?
Yeah.
He's not bad.
At our LGS, there was someone they had a list that they got emailed, and they were going through it, and they're like, oh, we need Obnix, and they look like they don't have one. I'm like, I do. What do you want for it?
Is there? We also had some feedback last week about the Red Show.
Yeah,
people did not agree with Max's take on haste.
No,
I won't read any of the ones because there was a bunch of responses from people. Yeah, Max, you're wrong.
Okay.
Whatever. I actually kind of I was involved with some of the Twitter responses about this. I kind of agree with you. I didn't really say anything on the show specifically. I don't think haste is bad or overrated or anything. I think in Commander, I think the word I used was it's the most inconsistent of the evergreen keywords, because which isn't true in Standard. Like in Standard, I think it's really, or other formats, it's really good. But in Commander, you see a lot of things like Blind Obedience, where things come into play tapped, or what's the red Praetor?
Urbrask.
So you get things that turns it off, and you don't see those kind of things nearly as frequently in other formats. And in Standard, you also get situations where, because there's 4 players, you just get blockers in a way that maybe your haste isn't going to do anything. Like I'm gonna play this, but I can't do anything with it. Whereas I think if you're playing a really aggressive format like Modern, you're almost always going to be doing something with it.
True. So
I think it's a keyword that kind of doesn't. It can miss in ways that maybe other ones don't.
I might be devil's advocate now. So you only play Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots for the protection?
No, absolutely not. No, it's really useful. I'm not saying it's bad.
Okay.
I just feel like I agree. It's a little bit. It's inconsistent. I'll go back to that word again. Okay. Compared to something like Indestructible or Flying. Flying's almost always there. Indestructible is almost always going to be there. I mean, there are cards that shut them off, but I see things that make haste irrelevant more often than I see things that make trample irrelevant.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean,
doesn't make it bad.
I love haste. I'm a red player through and through, but in the Commander format,
right,
a lot of the creatures who have haste printed on them are not that great.
Right.
Nope.
So unless you're hitting them early turns, if you hit them turn 30, you're halfway through the game or pretty much the game's over, and you hit a haste guy who's a 2/2, it's like, well, that just kind of doesn't work.
It also helps that Like when I'm looking at a big green beating creature, I want it to have trample because I don't want to have to deal with giving it trample.
Yep.
If I see a big red beater creature that doesn't have haste, I'm like, oh, well, I can get Hall the Bandit Lord, or I can use Flamekin Village, or I can use
Handweir
Battlements. Or Fervor's cheap. Is it 2 or 3 mana?
3 mana.
3 mana. Perforos's Hammer is only 3. There's a bunch of ways to give things haste. Anger in your graveyard. More so than there are ways to give things other keyword abilities. It feels like, particularly having 3 of them on a land that doesn't really take up a slot in your deck, makes it a lot easier to survive without haste maybe than it is trample or something.
Yes.
And one of them being a colorless land, everybody. That's Hall of the Bandit Lord.
Yeah.
And you pay 2 life.
3.
3 life.
3 life.
It's a pain.
Yeah.
But in like your Dromoka deck where you have life gain baked into your commander,
you net 2 off of
it's way less painful.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I can see some criticism of haste. So that is it. Anything else?
We have to announce 3 new Patreons that have subscribed to our channel.
Nice.
We want to thank Ben Gwendine, Ryan Martinez, and Marcus Raganassi. Thank you guys for supporting the show. And we are going to be announcing some updates to our Patreon rewards in the near future.
Yeah, next week or 2, I think.
Probably in next week's show.
And we're also going to probably have some contests coming up here. We'll have some more information on that in the coming weeks as well.
Thank you for everybody who's supporting us. And if we butchered your name, don't worry. I'll take Max out back and beat him a little bit. So
okay. I'm wrong again.
The giant quart of beer will make that wrongness easier to deal with.
Who said this is my first quart of beer?
So we just discussed social media. For everyone else who wants to reach us out on social media, you can reach us on Twitter at CMDR Central, Facebook search us CMDR Central, YouTube search us CMDR Central, or find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
And just like the rest of them, we are on Patreon by searching CMDR Central.
So much CMDR Central in there.
So much of it. So how about news, Max?
Yeah, we did get some news this week. The first Dominaria story hit on the mothership. It was an excellent read, so I recommend everybody.
The second one came out on Thursday.
Really?
So we had 2 this week.
Okay.
So yesterday it came out.
Yeah, so I didn't realize it until
I'm way behind.
I just read the first one.
First one was really good.
Super impressed with it, so now I'll have to go back and read number 2.
They have, and I've forgotten her name, but I believe they have one writer doing the entire run for Dominaria. So it's
interesting.
One person. So she's able
the sci-fi writer. Yeah.
So she's able to like keep track of her plot, instead of having to hand it off to different people, because we've had that in the past where you get weird inconsistencies or whatever. It's her with one storyline all the way through. So
yeah,
it's
or
really
one
good
story's like all exciting and action packed,
right,
and then
exactly.
the next one's just like long and boring, and you're like, "Yep, here's some filler."
Because the second one was all the Liliana and Josu stuff.
Oh, awesome!
Which is really good.
Along with the story, we also got some preview cards from Dominaria, like the game day rewards and buy box promos and release weekend promos, which they officially spoiled the new legendary frame for the cards. Has cool curved border at the top. It's interesting. It's, when you're getting a legend in every pack, it's a good way to determine which one is actually the legend.
Yeah, I think it looks good. The only thing I thought maybe it should also be on the bottom, because there's all that black space in the bottom. You could have the same loop on the bottom to make it stand out more, but maybe that would have been too gaudy. Who knows? But I liked it. I thought
it might also cause an issue with their watermark post on it too.
We also had the Jace's Spellbook thing that got spoiled this week that had all new borders on those cards.
New borders, yep, the 8 cards in that, plus the 1 random foil of any of them.
I'm totally a Jace hater, but I want that Jace just because of the new coloring on that.
Those cards really look sharp.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to seeing those future Spellbooks too.
Oh, give me a Chandra that's good in that. Right. Oh, I'll be so happy.
It's not even that I have any problem with Jace or anything. I mean, I don't like Jace, but but seeing these Jace cards made me excited to see. Oh well, what are we going to get now for Chandra or Nissa or Bolas or whoever else they do?
I don't obviously Lightning Bolt would be great in the Chandra run, but I don't see how Chandra makes lightning. She's a fire mage.
That's true.
Chris, our resident red mage, how is that going to happen?
I'm trying to think of how you do this. Something with chemistry. If anyone's a chemist out there, listening,
I actually didn't
me
think
up.
of that. That never occurred to me, but you're right. That kind of does make sense that she might not have Bolt.
Right.
There might be a way. I don't know.
It's
Bolt makes fire, so maybe you can make Bolt out of,
Jace has Jace has Brainstorm in his, and as far as I can tell from the storyline, he doesn't use his brain very much. So
he did when he killed Alhammaret.
I guess. We also had the Fire Song and Sunspeaker legends Bonfire and Sunday.
Yep,
which was a Chinese translation, which I love.
Which is our hippie jam band that we're forming here in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
That's going to be buy a box only. So the only way to get that legend is from buy a box. So what do you guys think of that? Because this is kind of a throwback. Like way back in the day, they had cards that you could only get from buying a book. That's where Mana Crypt came from. Or there was a small dragon, the Lathany dragon, that you had to get by either going to a convention or buying, I think, Duelist magazine.
The card itself, I think, is phenomenal. I was discussing with other people, and they always thought that Soulfire Grandmaster should be legendary.
And it's kind of Soulfire, right?
And it's kind of like Soulfire, but it's missing the blue.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
As for getting it as a buy a box only, I don't think it's really going to be that hard to do. Someone's going to buy a box, and you're going to be able to trade it off them.
That was kind of my thought, too. Like, a bunch of people on Reddit were losing their minds about it. It's a buy a box. It's not like it's going to be a $30 card after you. If you're paying $90 for your box, there's only so much extra value that can be tacked onto that, just from an EV perspective.
See, and now I don't know what the rules are with LGSs and your WPN stores or whatever, but if you have excess left over, I do believe they're allowed to give them out as prize support type of stuff.
They are allowed to do prize support after a certain amount of weeks, and then I think they are allowed to sell them after 6 months.
Oh, is it after 6 months?
Yeah.
It's also not a card that's going to have a lot of. It's going to have no demand outside of Commander. And even
Brawl.
but even then, it's not going to be probably a one in the 99 of many decks. It's going to be as a commander, or you're just not playing it.
Yep.
If you want to get one, and it's not going to be more than $5 within maybe right away, but like in a month and a month and a half, it'll be nothing.
The new Boros General.
Maybe.
Yeah.
One of two.
It could be an interesting. I might try it.
It's a super neat card because it's something that Boros doesn't do.
Yep.
So making all your lightning helixes into super lightning helixes is pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
And of course, the final piece of news is Brawl.
Right. Yes.
So with that,
we might as well segue into the actual show.
Exactly.
So we're going to talk about Brawl today. In case you've been living under a rock, I guess we can actually talk about the specifics of what Brawl is.
Oh yeah.
Just a brief little bit of background. It was brought to Wizards of the Coast by senior creative brand designer Garrett Turner, who played among his friends, and he brought it to Gavin Verhey, and Gavin got into it with some other people at WotC. So at that point, they're like, well, let's just see if it's something that Wizards wants to support, and this is their release of it. But they've been designing for it, they said, with it in mind. So part of the reason they released it right now with Dominaria is because Dominaria was in part designed with Brawl in mind. I would bet that's part of the reason why we also saw so many legends in Ixalan.
That could be.
Because that was also probably something in the pipe that they could see for coming. So it's basically Commander with standard legal cards for the most part. There's a few exceptions. You're using the standard ban list. So like Smuggler's Copter is currently banned because it's banned in standard.
And it should be. Yeah,
that makes sense, I guess.
We'll cover that later.
That one makes sense. Other ones probably don't, but that one probably does. You could use Planeswalkers as your commander.
Interesting.
It's 30 starting life instead of 20 or for standard or 40 for commander, and it's a 60 card deck versus 100. And there's no commander damage rule. So it's standard commander basically.
Yep.
So first things first here. In like one sentence, what are your thoughts on it? What were your initial thoughts upon seeing it?
Mine is much more than a sentence.
Then I will go first. EDH 101.
My first thoughts.
That's 2 words.
It's a sentence, though.
a sentence. My thoughts were that if this gets them to make sets that look like Dominaria, I am on board. Even if I never play it.
Okay. So, I'm completely torn on this. Like, I do not like the fact that if this thing goes viral, it goes huge, Standard's going to become back to baby J Standard, $600 a deck type of deal for key cards. I also don't like that it's casual. I really think if they want this to be good, it needs to be a constructive format that can be supported.
Okay.
Could change in the future, but that I'm not sure about.
Okay. All right. So let's go little bit deeper here. So what are the positives you think about this format? Just in looking at it, having a few days to mull it over in your head, what are the upsides of them doing this?
So based on my one sentence answer,
right.
it's an intro commander. So it allows, we have quite a few newer players to Magic in our shop who see us playing Commander, but they're like, oh, that seems way too intense. I don't want to get into it. That's so many cards to work with.
Well, and it is. Like, it really is. It's if you're a new player and you're looking at a pool of 20,000 cards to choose from, and how often do you sit down at a table and you look around and you're like, I've seen 100 cards hit the table this game, and I didn't recognize one of them. Like, for a new player, that's pretty common occurrence.
I think this allows those new players to be able to use the cards they get through drafts that maybe they don't use in their standard constructed deck to build a deck and kind of tip their toe into the water of EDH. It also, in my opinion, now I'm not a standard player, but maybe lets them experiment with other deck archetypes that maybe could be viable in standard, but they're going to try it out in Brawl first and then add the 3 other copies of something into a deck.
Okay.
I think it's just a way for them to sucker people into playing standard. I'm going to hate on this format so bad today. I'm sorry, guys.
We're talking pros, not cons, because that's one of my cons.
I don't have any pros. So.
No pros.
Okay.
No.
I kind of agree with what Max said. I think it's going to let you play cards in a format that maybe you weren't able to play in standard. Like, if you're going to go to your draft, there's obviously some cards you're going to pull from your draft that you're going to put in a standard deck, but there's a bunch of them you're not. Like that 6-mana legend of some sort. I can't even think of one off the top of my head that I would use for an example. Or a 1-mana legend, Ovaya Pashiri out of why can't I think of the name?
Aether Revolt or Kaladesh Block?
We'll
go Kaladesh Block.
Kaladesh Block. I think she was Aether Revolt.
That's still Kaladesh Block.
Yeah, right. 1 drop, but like she's a decent.
Yep.
She's a neat card, but like she saw no play in standard really. And the only reason I've ever seen one cast in Commander is because I draw a card off it in my Recce deck. And I don't think anyone else runs it anywhere else. But like if you have that card sitting there, that might be something like you could build a deck around that perhaps in Brawl. So I think it lets people use their otherwise unused standard cards in a way that they were otherwise just sitting in a shoebox. I think Max kind of touched on this a little bit too. It's going to let you play cards in a way that you probably couldn't normally. We've talked on here before about doing energy. Yep. There's not enough to do energy in Commander. There's probably enough to do energy here.
Oh, 60-card deck,
there is. You could build an energy-themed deck pretty easily. Now, you're not going to have like proliferate abilities and those kind of things, but like
or Aetherworks Marvel.
Right, right.
We will cover all of this later. My entire notes are ban list.
I'm just slowly bringing them up. I got to get it in people's minds. Cards that are banned.
Well, like Lannery Storm, like you're not going to build probably a Lannery Storm pirate deck just because it's going to be Beckett Brass is going to be much better for pirates. However, in this format where it's slower, you're not going to want 3 colors are real. This is a negative, but like 3 colors is going to be tough to hit using standard cards, particularly with only 1 of each land. Well, mono red Lannery Storm Pirates is viable maybe in a way that it is in other formats. So it's also going to open up things like that.
So we briefly touched on, EDH is like a 20,000 card pool.
Right.
There are currently just shy of 1,400 cards in standard as of today. So not counting Dominaria, but
so there's going to be just shy of 1,600, just over 1,600 when Dominaria comes out. It's
right.
Like
yeah.
It's a 296 card set.
And then we'll add another couple hundred with the core set.
Yep.
But they'll all be new cards that the players probably recognize from having played standard or doing drafts and stuff versus, hey, I got 3 cards from Mirage in my hand right now that you've literally never heard of.
Yep.
Which happens to a lot of new players.
Because they are a Mirage.
Right. There's also, was it 47 some?
Oh, I did all this math as well.
You did?
I did. So currently in standard today, there are 45 legendary creatures, and there are 28 planeswalkers in standards, which are allowed to be used as your commander in Brawl.
And we're going to add another 25 to 30 legends, probably, it looks like, in Dominaria. So, I think there's a lot to work with there.
Yep.
But it's not going to be overwhelming, I don't think, either.
No.
I like the fact that you can use planeswalkers for your commander because it gives us a preview of what it might look like a little bit in actual commander without having to deal with it. Because I'm not entirely sure. We talked about this in the show. We're not sure if it's really a problem. but do you want to just start doing it and find out then? This at least gives you kind of a preview of it. It's not the same because there's obviously no Soren Markov and there's no doubling season, but at least it lets you see how dirtily it makes things or how much it handicaps you being able to having to run a commander that can't do damage.
Yep.
So I'm curious about too. I think that gives us like a trial balloon to kind of see how this plays out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I think we brought this up a couple weeks ago due to a listener comment on our Planeswalker show that, maybe it really isn't as broken as we all think it's going to be.
Right.
Especially in Brawl, you don't have doubling season. You don't have Soren Markov. You don't have the really flat out broken Planeswalkers. But you do have some intense ones like that green-white Hatley in a token deck. Could be really hard to deal with.
It'll kind of give us a feel for what it will be like in Commander.
Yep.
Because it wouldn't surprise me to see that on the horizon as a change they're considering at least.
Which I wouldn't have a problem with that.
No, I would like to see how it plays out here first. But yes, I think it would probably be okay. But this gives us kind of a preview. I think it makes bomb cards bombier in ways that we're not used to in Commander. In Commander, everything's a Baneslayer Angel. I mean, it isn't, but like pretty frequently you look around and there's that person's got a Noah Schnorr out, and this person has a Baneslayer Angel out, this person has a Avenger of Zendikar out, and this person's running something else. There's Standard being such a limited card pool. When someone drops that Baneslayer or whatever the equivalent of it is in Standard, that's a real deal serious thing to have to reckon with in ways it isn't in Commander where just everything is a Baneslayer.
It's almost like it's a constructed draft deck.
To a degree, yeah.
Because in Limited, that's if you draft that bomb, it's a bomb.
And if you draft it and get it in play, you probably just win.
Right.
I think there's an element of that's kind of interesting that we don't see in Commander.
I feel like I'm not talking at all because I really don't like this format.
You'll pipe up when the cons come.
Well, and I think though in a similar vein, I think it makes mechanics a little more special. Take flying, for example, in Commander. Again, there's a lot of stuff with flying because people run things with evasion or run entire decks with all flying creatures.
You're crazy. I don't know what you're
talking
about.
With all death touch creatures.
Yep.
I mean, I've got that. So, like, people do those kinds of things. In this case, when there's a much more limited card pool, that beater with flying is that's a much bigger deal to have evasion. Or that creature with death touch the Gitrog Frog is a much bigger thing to deal with, a 6/6 with death touch, than maybe it is in Commander.
Gitrog's not legal in this, just so everyone is aware.
Yeah, it wouldn't be, would it? Yeah.
No.
Well, that's
I understand where you're going with it. I don't want people to go, oh, we could go build Gitrog. I'm like, oh, no.
Gonti is, though.
Yes, he is.
Right. And the last note I'd say is it might increase the value or demand for some Standard cards, which is also in my negatives, but that's a good thing in some ways. Like I've got this, there's cards that if you're a Standard player who only plays Standard, even if you're not going to play Brawl, that's a nice thing to have your draft chaff that you have sitting in a shoebox that's never going to be any good for you Standard that might suddenly be worth something. That's useful.
It could be.
It can cause other problems elsewhere, but for some people, being able to turn those cards into that suddenly have value, be able to trade those off is a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to have more cards be playable in more places versus having a bunch of your stuff be worthless.
Right.
So, all right, Chris, here's your chance to shine.
Oh, cons.
What do you think? What do you think the problems with the format are?
Well, let's just go into this. Okay, the lack of commander damage, I think, is going to be a big problem.
I 100% agree with you on this.
I don't foresee it becoming an issue in every game, but some games it could become an issue.
Well, I think it's a little less. Number one, 30 life total. So it feels weird to have commander damage be 20. Maybe it could have been 15.
It could have been.
Made it 15 since we're lowering the life totals.
So I have an example of this. We're going to go turn 1 Sacred Cat, who's a 1/1 with lifelink.
Right.
We're going to go 2/2 vanilla 2/2 vampire, who's a 2/2 with lifelink. We're going to go turn 3 Queen's Commission, create 2 1/1 vampires with lifelink. A complete deck full of lifelink creatures. If you don't have commander damage or you're not playing fast enough, they can just sit there at God knows what life and just win the game.
You can
especially in a singleton format.
Yes. My notes on this is the fact that if this is intro to EDH, as I've been saying throughout the show, it's going to be a rude awakening when you have that new Magic player who's like, cool, Brawl's really awesome. I'm ready to make that jump to real commander. And they take their Brawl commander and they add 40 more cards to it. and they're like, oh, what's this thing called command damage? And you get smacked in the face by a Rafik wearing 2 swords and, an Eldrazi conscription, and you're dead on turn 6.
Right. They're not used to that.
They're not used to that. It's going to be a very rude awakening, and
they probably won't play with that, again.
Right.
They're probably going to go back to what they were originally doing.
But you shouldn't play with the Rafik players again. That's.
I was going to say it. I'm glad you did, though.
No, that's different. That's okay. No, I know what you're saying.
Right.
That's going to
Says the guy who used to play Rafik.
I did. I did. I had a Rafik deck for like 2 weeks. I didn't have it for long.
No, it wasn't for long, but.
Exalted didn't work real well.
Yeah, right. That's the problem with Rafik, is it turns your Exalted deck into a Rafik deck because Rafik's so good. No, I think that's a legitimate problem. I don't think it's quite as bad as it would be taking away from Commander, like we mentioned before, but I think it's an issue.
Along with that, though, is like when I build an EDH deck, I debate, do I want to go Voltron? Sure. It's a viable strategy in Commander, knowing that you can use your Commander for command damage and one-shot someone. Not having that type of archetype in Brawl, I think, is a downside. There are enough enchantments where you can build a Voltron-type deck with all the cartouches and whatnot to make your creature, your commander, deal 15 points of command damage or 20 points of command damage or whatever.
Mm-hmm. It's probably even a little bit easier in this format because there's so much less efficient removal.
Yes.
That's the big problem with Voltron in regular Commander is your Commander better have hexproof, or you're just going to get 2 for 1 or 3 for 1 or 5 for 1, or spend the whole game like every Kemba deck I've ever seen, spending all your mana every turn to re-equipping Kemba, only to have Kemba immediately die. Then you have to wait 3 turns.
Which is just bad play, because once Kemba dies the 3rd time, you really should be focusing on the rest of the cards.
Or figuring out a new deck.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to build Nazan.
Can we just pause here and say the problem is the fact they're not playing Balan, the Wandering Bard.
Balan, right, yeah. So yeah, no, that becomes a problem, losing that archetype too, and I think it will be a much easier archetype to build here than it would maybe in regular Commander.
Right.
Another one I have is, to be competitive with this, you're almost going to have to stick to 2 colors, because there are very few 3-color generals to begin with, so you're stuck in 2 colors. Now with regular standard format, yeah, why don't you give us a number? I'll keep talking. With regular standard format, you can splash a color for removal. In this, since you're limited to your commander's colors, you're stuck in those colors.
You're also limited to 1 of each land, meaning you have a limited amount of dual lands you can run.
That is.
So with a 3-color deck, in a standard environment, you're going to be limited to maybe 6 dual lands total.
And an Aether Hub.
Right, and the Aether Hub equivalents, or I guess an Evolving Wilds to go grab one of your basics. But like, you're going to, pretty frequently in Commander with a 3-color deck, you can very often, if you have a decent mana base, even without ABUR duels, if you've got a few fetches and cheap duels, you can pretty frequently hit all 3 of your colors by turn 3 pretty easily. That is not going to be the case here. There's going to be a lot of games where you're like 6, 7, 8 turns deep before you hit that 3rd color.
The 3-color options you have for your commander in Brawl are Gishath, Zakama, Samut, and both Nicol Bolas Planeswalkers.
And a Captain Admiral Beckett
Brass, yep.
Beckett Brass, however you pronounce the name.
The Grixis Pirate.
Which is, I'm going to put this out there for all our listeners. I want this to blow up on Twitter. Is Admiral Beckett Brass a female or a male?
It's a woman.
Is it a woman?
In the story.
Is it confirmed?
She's also old. She's also like 60.
Okay, because
she's like
according to the art, we got into a huge argument at the store. They're like, "No, that's a guy." I'm like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, she's like just like stout Grandma Beckett Brass.
Okay,
yeah.
We support whatever choice Admiral Beckett Brass chooses.
Correct. That is correct. So yeah, no, she's a granny.
Okay, a granny. I'd love it.
Yeah, no, that's kind of cool. I kind of like that. She's a pirate granny. Well, not only 3-color, 5, because there's one 5-color commander that's in the Dominaria releases, and we won't go into it too much. It's a 3-color casting cost with a 5-mana activated ability, so that makes it a 5-color commander. You're never going to get 5 colors in this format. It's
going to be, unless they reprint fetches or some sort of any color mana dorks, it's going to be nearly impossible.
Well, colorless too. The same rules about lands apply here as apply in Commander, so you can only use lands that make colorless mana for your colorless deck. So if you're making Hope of Jirper, or if there's conceivably a colorless Planeswalker perhaps in Dominaria, maybe,
I don't know. Is there?
So let's say hypothetically there is another Karn. Maybe. Well, I was talking to Jumbo Commander today. We're with a couple other people discussing this, and he went through and counted, and I think he said there was 22 colorless lands legal and standard right now. That's pretty tight to make a colorless deck work.
That would be tight in a 60-card deck, unless you're playing extremely low to the ground fast.
And part of those, 6 of them, or might have even been 8, were deserts from Amonkhet. And that's not a normal thing. It was just Amonkhet had that desert theme, so there was a bunch of colorless deserts. So odds are most sets are going to have less than that. So once Amonkhet rotates, you're probably down to 18 or so of those colorless lands on average, I would say, over a course of a full standard cycle. It's going to be really tough to use those colorless ones too. And maybe they'll they can work around that. Maybe they'll change it at some point and say you can use any basic land in your colorless deck or whatever. Who knows? I mean, they could fix that, but as it stands right now, that's going to be really tough to play those colorless commanders.
Or maybe they do something along the lines with the wastes, not necessarily put it in a set, but in a
Brawl pre-con if they start doing those.
Yeah,
or just say wastes are always Brawl legal, period.
Yeah.
Just make an exception and say wastes are always Brawl legal.
Just to make it another archetype that someone could play.
But none of that fixes the 3 or 4 or 5 color problem.
No, and I don't think there is going to be a fix for
I don't know if there is either. I also think, like you mentioned before, this being a casual format, and that word is used multiple times in the material for it. It's supposed to be a casual format. Casual format and rotating card pool aren't two things I associate really either. I mean, you're a casual player, and you're going to see every year essentially half your deck disappear.
Yep.
Including the possibility that your commander's going away as well. So once your commander, I mean, you have to build entirely new deck every other year, half a new deck every year, and every other year your deck's gone. I don't think that's as casual as they seem to think it is.
No, I don't agree with it being as a casual format at all.
No, the more we discuss, I'm agreeing with you. It needs to be some sort of constructed REL, a format supported through tournament play versus just a side event or casual at your shop.
And maybe it will evolve into that. And maybe that would be interesting to see it become that, where people are like, because seeing people play really competitively with a really limited card pool is fun to watch.
Yes, it is.
Because like there's a lot more on the line when you have to when you're trying to squeeze blood out of a rock, like when you're trying to make these bad cards work really well. Like that's fun to watch.
Oh, murder is going to become commonplace, I have a feeling.
Sure. I've got one more point I want to make about weaknesses here, and I think that the way the color pie works, in Commander, there's definitely problems with white and red, which we've talked about before. But if you dig back and dig deep enough, you can find some cards that offset that. Like Land Tax is a really great card in white because it kind of gives you draw, or at least fills your hand with lands, makes you hit those land drops. Land Tax is gone. Like cards like Land Tax that cover for white's weaknesses are gone. White's losing the 2 best removal spells in the format, which are Swords to Plowshares and Path. White has terrible draw, but it kind of limps through by using a bunch of artifacts. Those are all gone.
No Chaos Warp in red.
There's no Chaos Warp in red.
See, and I'm going to go pro on this. Oh my God, I can't believe you guys pulled me into this. This won't be an issue in a standard format because it's only standard cards.
But it's still 4 players in that white deck. If you're trying to play a mono white deck or a Boros deck, you're still looking at games that are probably going 12 to 15 turns at least to deal 30 damage to 3 other people. And then if you're playing white particularly, because red has looting cards, I guess, nowadays. But if you're playing white in particular, you're going to be hellbent on turn 5 and just top deck mode. Like there's no white options aside from the Immortal Sun.
Yep.
That draws you cards consistently every turn.
And turns off your Planeswalkers. If you're playing a white Planeswalker commander, that's not an option. And there's a lot of good white Planeswalker commander. Like Gideon would be 2 Gideons.
You have 2 Gideons to use.
So you can't run your Gideon then if you're running the Immortal Sun, or at least you have to be pretty careful about it. So I think it's going to amplify a bunch of weaknesses.
Okay.
You're losing all their artifact ramp that a bunch of colors rely on, but green still has a couple ramp spells, so green can still ramp. It's not Sky Shroud Claim, but like there's multiple ramp spells for green that are in standard right now.
It's also not attuned with Aether,
right?
Which we'll put a pin in.
And black still has draw. There's like they're not. It's not Read the Bones.
Yep.
Or is Read the Bones legal right now?
It's not Read the Bones. There's 2 of them. They're very similar.
There's one
energy ones.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you have Argyle's Blood Crypt, or the flip enchantment.
And there's a 3 mana draw 2 black spell from Dominaria that was in the spoilers. So there's black still has draw coming to it. Rishkar's Expertise is still legal for green, but white has nothing.
I still don't see this being an issue because I play Standard, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say 70% of the decks that are in Standard do not play draw cards in their deck anyways.
Yeah, but those games are over, I think, a lot faster than these are going to be over.
You also have 4 copies of every card.
You do have 4 copies, but I don't think it's going to be an issue with card draw.
Yep. If that was the case, I would.
Yep.
That could be the case because we're not there yet. I'm just guessing. So that's my other downside here. Is there anything else you guys could really think of?
I have 3 decks that I think are going to take over the format.
Well, so do you think it's the kind of thing that can be solved? Like Tiny Leaders was, I looked at Tiny Leaders in 10 minutes. I'm like, someone's going to figure out these.
Oh, we broke that
best
format
commanders.
hard when we played that.
Yeah.
Yep. With the amount of cards that are in the pool, I don't know if it really can be solved.
And it rotates too.
And
so
this is where we're going to go back to. I don't agree with it being casual, but now why they're saying it's casual, because it's only, someone's going to find the X best general to play. Like in my opinion, being a mono red player, and people are going to hate me on Twitter for this, I think Hazret is the best deck.
Okay.
A 4-mana indestructible god who can come out of the command zone whenever you want, with a 3-mana ability to discard a card to deal 2 damage to each opponent.
And when you only have 1-ofs in your deck, it's a lot easier to stay hellbent.
Yep. You run a lot of burn, run a lot of low-cost creatures that have haste or ETB can't block, which is a lot of the cards that are in Standard right now. Another deck I have was the one that I brought up before, was the Vampires or Life Gain strategy. And a black-white shell, that's just going to go bonkers.
Sure.
Yep.
You have the removal, you have all the life gain. Another one that I came up with was Temet, the blue-white guy who embalms or eternalizes, one of the two. But playing a token-based deck with that, because he makes tokens stronger. And you're playing all the eternalize, all the embalm creatures, all the token-generating sorceries and instants that are in white.
Scarab God.
Yes, Scarab God's another one.
Granted, he's a $30 card, but with the limited amount of removal, when you cast that Scarab God,
yep,
he's just going to always be in the game. You will never get rid of it for an extended period of time.
Yeah, it could be the same thing with any of the gods like that. The Scorpion God, any of them that just keep coming back.
Well, at least the Scorpion God, there's a lot less draw to proc a bunch of, or not Scorpion God, Locust God. There's less draw to proc a bunch of stuff. I guess there's plenty of -1 counter stuff in Standard that you can.
There is. I don't know about Singleton, but I know that there's quite a bit.
But yeah, the Scarab God is just going to be fantastic.
No. I think Kamina would be fun. The blue-green merfolk.
Yes.
Well, again, Kamina, you have the advantage of Kamina's just even in regular Commander probably the best merfolk generally.
Right.
So it's absolutely.
And right now she has a lot of merfolk to play with.
Yeah, and a ton of the ones that are good in the Kamina deck are ones, obviously not all of them, but there's a bunch of good merfolk that are in Ixalan.
Yep. And her flip.
And there's more coming in Dominaria.
Right, and her flip land is the closest you're going to get to an overrun.
Right.
In Standard.
Right.
So that would be the Brawl deck I would pick if I had to.
So the only other downfall I see, and I'm sure someone's going to figure it out, but there is, as far as I could tell, in a 60-card singleton, nearly, I don't want to say impossible, really hard to build a combo deck that would keep the format in check.
Yeah, I can see that.
Something that they sit down and they go, you guys have to kill me, have to find a way to kill me in your whatever, say you're playing the two brothers, the new people that got spoiled, or whatever, the Boros deck, and I'm a combo deck. Yeah. I can kill you.
Bonfire and Sunday.
Yep. I can kill you on turn 6. Well, you're playing Boros, you ain't gonna be able to kill me by then.
Right.
I don't know if there is a deck like that out there right now.
I think you touched on it earlier. It's going to be the life gain deck.
You think that's how it's going to be?
It's not going to be a combo deck. It's just going to be I'm going to outpace you. I'm going to gain enough life fast enough, and you will never catch up. And I think you'll see some sort of rules change where they will implement a commander damage type of rule.
Well, and even without commander damage, you have things in regular commander like Infect or like Berserk, or you have ways that you can hit somebody for 60 damage.
Yep, really hard if need be.
And that's a much more difficult, if not impossible thing to do here.
Yep.
Okay, so if you were to build one of these decks, is there anything that jumps out at you for commanders you'd like to try? I mean, I'm not going to build a deck, but I'm curious if you were going to, what would you like to try?
Well, I'm gonna start out by saying that I'm not sure if I'm gonna build one.
Yeah,
I'm gonna wait
and
and see how the demand and the interest is at LGS. If it does start taking off, I have enough of the standard cards to build, but I'm totally gonna build Hazoret and just hate on everybody.
Like I said earlier, I would build either Merfolk with Kamina or the white-black lifelink deck, because there are 34 cards in standard right now that have lifelink on them.
Nice.
And majority of them are white and black. There's a few green ones, but that's about it.
I do think Vona, the Vampire General, would be a really good card in this format.
She's pretty decent just in general, let alone being able to play her in this format. And I think Gonti, who's really strong in general, like in regular Commander, and you still have Panharmonicon in this format as well. So I think Gonti would be probably be a fun deck. I think there's things I was looking at that are like, there's decks that I don't build in Commander because the commanders are maybe a worse version of something else that's out there. But in this case, you're like, oh, no, it's not. It's the best version of that thing, like Vona. If you're going to build black-white tokens, Vona's probably the best option to do that. She probably isn't in regular Commander, but here she is.
Yeah, with no reason for Commander damage, you put her out there at the most opportune time when most of your stuff's going to die, you just let her go to the graveyard.
Right.
Yep.
You don't even care because it's like, okay, she did her part. You know, I don't need Commander damage, so why would I even bother putting her back in there?
And then and then find some way to there's reanimation spells and then bring her back.
I also think this is the format where I would try a Scorpion God deck, just because you only have 2 Rakdos legendary creatures and 1 Rakdos Planeswalker. So it'd be, since I don't want to build Rakdos in regular Commander, this might be where I'd test the water with that.
I do really like the Scorpion God even in regular Commander, though. I don't think I would run him as a general, but as the one of that I added to Alesha, he's done work for me.
I think I'd also wouldn't mind trying some of the Planeswalkers just for the fun of it.
Right.
Yeah, just see how it happens.
Yeah. All right. So what else we got here? Okay, so I kind of, Max was mentioning this before, but so do you think this has a chance to succeed as a format? Because I made the joke before about
Tiny Leaders
and Frontier, but as you said, those weren't supported by Wizards.
Right.
Those were just like player-made formats, which Commander was. So, I mean, formats can take off if they're player-made, but that's definitely an advantage for the fact that they're pushing it. But so do you think it has a chance? Is this a niche that people want to play in?
So here are my thoughts on this. I've been kind of thinking about this all day. The fact that WotC is supporting this format, I look at Pauper. Pauper used to be an MTGO pretty much only format. The minute Wizards started controlling the ban list and promoting it in paper format, the numbers at the event attendance that Channel Fireball has started having Pauper events at have gone through the roof exponentially weekend after weekend. The fact that WotC is kind of controlling Brawl with the standard ban list and it rotates, I think it lets them keep an eye out for it, and if it does get interest, it'll allow them to try to do precons and get people, cool, you don't like playing standard, but you like playing Brawl. They still make their money because you're buying standard packs. You're still buying those precons. And who knows, maybe it will become a competitive format like Chris is hoping it will be, or it should be. I just think having WotC have their fingers on it from the start gives me a little more faith in it over formats like Frontier and Tiny Leaders.
Well, and they can do things to push it, like make sets like Dominaria with extra legends.
Yep.
Or they can very easily, like those Planeswalker decks that everyone, that at least players like us don't buy because the Planeswalkers are bad, number one, and there's just never cards that are good in them or that we care about. Well, suddenly if those decks become tweaked just slightly to be
a Brawl deck,
well, that changes things then, like, because number one, the card quality might increase a little bit, or at least be more synergistic with those decks, and then by virtue of that become more synergistic with your Commander deck. And
the card quality doesn't necessarily have to be good if they print something new that could become playable.
Right, that like interacts in a way with your thing that your deck does, because there's no need to do that right now. But if they print this Gideon Planeswalker deck and suddenly they've got a card in it that tutors up any Gideon or does something with a Gideon, well, that suddenly maybe changes things if you've got Gideon in your Super Friends deck or something.
Yep.
I think, we talked about the legend that's the buy a box promo only. I think manipulating those Planeswalker decks that come out with every set into a Brawl type precon and putting like, hey, you can only get this legend in a Brawl deck, or you can only get this uncommon that could be good in standard, if you run 4 of, but it's really good in Brawl if you just have a 1 of. Put those specific format type cards in those decks that can still be used in Standard. You could buy it and part it out, so you need 2 copies of that legend. You only need, I think there's a lot of cool things Wizards can do with this format in their current products that don't do real well, especially in our local area.
Well, and it doesn't change anything too. If you're the Joe Kitchen Table player who occasionally buys those Planeswalker decks, if they're suddenly tweaked to be Brawl decks, you're still not going to notice. Like if you're just a Kitchen Table player who buys it, like, oh, cool, Gideon, I want that deck, and the deck has been tweaked to be playable in Brawl, it's still going to be the same deck that you as the casual player at home bought. You're not going to notice a difference. Yep. So there's no downside to it, but there's plenty of upside.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I have a feeling someone's going to jump on this on social media, but I could have sworn they're done printing the Planeswalker decks anyways. Because aren't they now the new Standard constructed decks that they're printing?
No, I think that's an addition to the Planeswalker deck.
Okay.
The challenge decks were replacing the dual decks.
Dual decks, okay.
Because the Planeswalker deck, because we at the very least have a Teferi and Chandra one coming out.
Yep.
And then there's one of the 2 Chinese Planeswalkers that are new characters.
Yep.
Okay.
Because those Planeswalkers are legal in Standard, even though they are pretty bad.
Yep. And to kind of piggyback off my comment about there being no downside, the other thing here is there's really no downside to this format. Like if Brawl doesn't take off and by July it's a dead format,
Standard's still around.
Standard's still around, and they've still printed a bunch of cool cards in Dominaria. Like I was pumped about Dominaria without knowing Brawl existed. Knowing Brawl exists doesn't change anything. I'm still pumped about Dominaria, and there's still a bunch of cool commander cards in it.
Yep.
So like there's really no downside. If Brawl doesn't take off, they've still made me want to buy Dominaria.
Yeah.
Among our play group, there's more people looking to buy boxes of Dominaria than any Standard set since Khans of Tarkir. I can't think of the last time I've known so many people that are like, I'm buying a box for sure now. And I can think of like 8 or 9 people that I've talked to that are buying boxes that I know haven't bought boxes in years, and aside from like a master set box or something.
And half of them don't even play Standard. They just specifically want it for EDH.
It's like, oh, there's so many cool cards and there's so much good artwork and the sagas are cool and whatever. So like there's a lot of things in this set that are good for commander players that maybe were designed in part for Brawl, but if it doesn't take off, it's still a pretty cool set. So there's no risk for Wizards here.
I think that it has a high likely chance of taking off due to the fact that people who play Standard now have a secondary format they can play with the same exact cards that they already play.
Exactly, with the exact cards that you got in your draft or that you got in your packs that you cracked to get Standard cards. You now have something secondary that you can do with
I think it has a chance. I'm not saying it's gonna, but I think it has a chance too. It depends all on how much players want to play. And
I think a lot of those players then, 6 months down the road or a year down the road, are going to be switching to EDH. Just like a lot of Standard players eventually migrate to Modern, I think the same thing will happen here with regular Commander.
Yep.
And that's good for us.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris had a lot of negatives to say about it, but
have
we changed your mind a little bit, or have you changed your stance a little bit?
Not really.
Okay. All right.
If it were constructed with a theme behind it that we're going to support this through F&Ms, we're going to support this through tournament play or whatever, I'd probably be behind it a lot more. But I don't like the term casual play type of deal.
That's fair.
And maybe that's what they're doing for now.
Yes, that could be too.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going to see how well it does through Dominaria, through the core set, through the fall set, and then, oh cool, that next big set is coming out. Let's change it to a competitive format. Let's do a GP based on it. Let's see what happens.
See, I would like to see Star City Games or Channel Fireball throw side events for it and give us numbers on it.
Yeah.
Sure.
How many people showed up for side events for it type of deal?
Like they did with Pauper this summer.
Yep.
I mean, when we went to GP Minneapolis this summer, Frontier was still a side event.
It was.
Yep. Yeah. It was a 2 times a day side event all 3 days.
But I bet it won't be this summer.
I don't think it'll be on the chart at all.
No.
I think Frontier was a mistake. Being a huge Modern player, Modern is my number one format, followed by EDH. We've all discussed this, and we believe that Frontier could become another format, given another 5 to 10 years, so they have more of a card pool to go off of.
Or a different start date.
Yes.
Picking the start date they picked basically made it Tarkir block constructed for the most
part. And
part.
that's all it was. Yeah, it was all, because I played it a few times, and it was all constructed with Tarkir cards, pretty much.
Here's my, I guess, overall opinion of Brawl is, because every now and then we'll do something fun for a weekend. We'll be like, let's build a budget deck, that it costs no more than $50.
Let's play with these plane chase.
Yep, plane chase cards. Or, we've thrown around the idea of a block a plane constructed EDH deck. So all your cards have to have been from a plane. So cool, I'm picking Zendikar, so I now have 6 sets to use or whatever.
No Return to Ravnica?
Shut up. It was the first thing that came to my head. You know I pick Ravnica. I think Brawl is Wizards' attempt to make a block constructed EDH.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned Pauper. It's also got a little bit of Pauper overlap. Like, we didn't really touch on that, but in a way, it's kind of a Pauper format, too. I mean, yes, your commanders are going to be rare, planeswalkers, but
you'll be playing a lot more commons and
absolutely.
uncommons than rares.
Yeah. All right. I think my final stake is I don't really care because it gets me commander cards. So
same.
So like I'm probably not going to play it, but if its popularity gets me sets that look like Dominaria, I'm fine with that. I love the way Dominaria looks so far.
I'm sure I'll get suckered into it. I've tried really hard to stay away from Pauper, so if this keeps me away from Pauper even more, then cool.
All right. I think that's all we got this week. We'll be back next week, but until then, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
This week's episode was all about our thoughts on the new format Brawl. But in all reality, the only Brawl we care about is happening at GP Vegas against Commander Cookout. Ryan, Brando, you guys have accepted our challenge, and now you must accept your fate, because at Vegas, Commander Central is walking away with the victory.